Alright guys, so I guess you're wondering what is in this box right here. Well, last April of this year 2022, this paint marker manufacturing company called CARMEL Industries from Montreal, Canada hit me up on Instagram asking me if I was interested in testing out a few of their paint markers and doing a little review on it on my YouTube channel. So naturally I said yes. Now the name of their markers are CARMEL Paint Markers. You can check out the website carmelindustries.com. I'll put it in the description box below. So they were cool enough to send me a few different types of their acrylic paint markers, and here it is. I haven't opened the box yet, so let's open it up and see what I have to work with. Alright, so according to the website, I noticed 3 acrylic paint marker sizes and the 3 nib sizes. They have a larger wide nib, a medium nib, and a finer tip nib. So it looks like they sent me the finer nib markers, and that looks like the medium nib markers too. Wow, these feel kind of weighty though. They feel heavy duty, which I kind of like. Alright, let's open these guys up. So CARMEL Industries sent me 11 of their acrylic paint markers. Now these are all water-based, so let's go through each color one by one. So here you have the purple, you have blue, light blue, the green, light green, you have the yellow, there's the orange, brown, red, pink, and white. There's also a black and a silver, but they only provided me with these, and here is the nib. So individually, these markers go for about $4.88 on their website. Alright, so let's take a look at the finer nib markers. So it looks like they provided me with 7 of the finer nib paint markers. So here you have the black, the blue, green, orange, red, pink, and white. And here's the nib size. But let's compare the medium nib and the finer nib together. Alright guys, so before I do anything else, I want to test out these markers to see how they work on a few different surfaces, mainly surfaces that I've already been using, like bristle boards or regular sheets of paper, foam boards, or even a hard smooth surface like maybe a record, vinyl. I'll find something. But anyways, let's test these markers out. Alright, so here we have a plain regular sheet of paper and a little thicker bristle board paper. But first we're going to start with the plain sheet of paper, and we're just going to go down the colors and see how close do the paint match the color of the cap. So as you can see here, the actual paint looks a little darker than the cap color. I really like the cap color, it looks nice and pink. So let's just see how the rest of the paint looks compared to their caps. Alright, so again, the red paint looks darker than the actual cap. The cap color looks very bright red and vibrant. I don't know if it's because the paint is still wet, so let's just wait and see. Alright guys, so as you can see, the pink has dried and it still seems to be a little bit darker than the cap color. The red is still darker than the red cap color. The orange is just a little bit darker than the orange cap color, but you know, it's not too bad. The yellow, not too far off from the cap color. The dark green is a little darker, but still not too bad. The light green, it's not too far off, but the purple looks kind of charcoalish, grayish, purplish, not even matching the cap color. Same with the brown. The brown cap color looks more vibrant. The blue, that's not too far off. I think that's pretty good. And the light blue is just a little bit a tone different. Well, to some this may be an issue, but to me, not a problem at all. I tend to make do with what I have, and if the color works, then it works. But on the other hand, someone may be looking at the color caps of these markers and say, hey, that's the precise color tone that I need. And once they use the marker and they find out that the paint is a little bit darker than what the cap looks like, then I can see how that can be a little bit disappointing. But I'm going to go ahead and move on and test out the finer nib markers. Seems pretty close. The orange, unlike the broader nib orange marker, the finer nib orange marker kind of close to the cap color. The green, not as green, but the broader nib green marker is a little darker. And the blue, not as blue as the cap color. I think the broader nib blue marker is even closer to the cap color. And here is the black. No complaints here for the black. Alright guys, so that was the plain sheet of white paper that I just used. I'm now going to move on to the next surface, and I did earlier mention bristle board, but I'm actually going to skip the bristle board because although the bristle board is just a little bit thicker than a regular sheet of paper, the results are going to be the same. I already tested it out on one color, so rather than waste my time on the bristle board, I really want to focus on using these markers on a black surface. I mentioned a black foam board earlier. It doesn't need to be a foam board just as long as the surface is black. I mean, in the past I've used Posca markers on the black foam board, and it did take me a couple of layers to really bring the opacity up on the colors. That's what happens when you use colors over a black surface. It sort of mutes the colors. So I'm just curious to see how these markers work on a black surface. So what I do have is a leftover scrap strip of black poster board that I've had before. So I'm going to test out these CARMEL markers on this black surface to see how it works. See if I need to do several layers to bring the opacity up or not. But I suspect I will, so let's see. Alright guys, so I'm moving on to the next surface, a surface that does not absorb the ink the same way that regular paper does. So what I have here is a cardboard in a plastic encasing, smooth, glossy surface. So let's see how these markers work on this plastic surface. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to blend each color into each other, starting with the green and working my way down to the purple. So these markers are blending similar to how the Posca markers blend, and it's pretty tough to blend these colors without a paintbrush, so I'm trying my best. And next, I'm just going to draw something random real quick. Alright guys, so now that I've tested out these markers, I think I'm ready to start creating with these CARMEL paint markers. But the question is, what am I going to draw? You know, I think I'm going to need some inspiration for this. Follow me. So I'm here at Tokyo Central, part of the Murokai Japanese market here in San Diego. And here we have a life-size Gundam. Well, actually, a human-sized Gundam. A life-size Gundam would be like that giant one that they built in Japan. So this Gundam was a very cool addition to the hobby section. So they actually expanded their hobby section here at Tokyo Central. They used to have a smaller hobby section across the other end of the store. So now it looks much nicer, a lot bigger, and much more organized. They even added, like I mentioned earlier, a human-sized Gundam. Alright guys, so I'm back. Man, I felt like a kid in a candy store at that hobby shop. It was pretty fun. But anyways, I think I have an idea what I want to draw, so let's get it. Alright guys, so because Carmel Industries didn't provide for me any gray markers, I'm going to cheat a little bit and use a Prismacolor gray. So, if some of you don't know what I'm drawing by now, I am drawing a version of Gundam, I believe from the Gundam Wing. I'm not quite sure, but if some of you know exactly which version of Gundam this is, please hit me on the comments below. Appreciate it. Alright guys, I thought this was pretty cool. As I was coloring, I decided to bang the pen against my finger and it created a splatter effect. I had no idea that would even work. Splatter effects are always something I try to include in my artwork when possible. And here I even blew on the tip of the marker, creating an even finer mist. It's pretty sick. Alright guys, so there you have it. I think that's about as much as I'm going to do and probably the best I can do with these markers. Now, I only have one other paint marker brand other than the Carmel markers, and that's Posca. So I can only compare my experience with the Carmel to my experience with the Posca markers. So here are my thoughts on these markers. So first, let's talk about its physical appearance. I like the way it looks. I like the way it feels. It feels really durable. It doesn't feel cheap. Now I'm going to compare this to the Posca marker. It feels really lightweight. It feels like plastic, and it feels really cheap. But the Carmel markers, it's really heavy duty. I think I mentioned that before. Okay, so let's take a closer look at the marker. I mean, nothing fancy. Looks like your standard, ordinary marker. You got the name, you got the warning labels, you got the directions, and yes, there are directions on this marker. And you got the cap color. Now let's take a look at the Posca marker. It's colorful. It looks fun. It looks art related. It's got the Japanese lettering on there to add to the visual appeal. You got the big colored cap, and it's pretty lightweight. But let's look at the two markers side by side. Well, on physical appearances, I'm going to have to give it to Posca on this one. But I'll tell you what, if both of these markers were ran over by a car, the Carmel marker would be the last marker standing. Now let's talk about its performance. Now, one thing I did notice about the Carmel markers is that the paint seems to be a little bit watered down. I mean, if I were to take a marker and try to paint over an existing color, the paint underneath would still show through. The color would still show through because the paint is just not thick enough to completely cover the existing color. I found that to be the case with the fine nib or fine tip marker, the white especially. So it was about right here where I was having problems with the white getting opaque. It's as if the paint were kind of watered down a bit, so I decided to break out the Posca marker to see if I would have the same problem. Obviously I didn't. But with the fine tip Carmel white marker, it seems I had to go over and over again in order to build up the opacity. Now that wasn't the case with all these Carmel markers. I mean, it was pretty much half and half. Half of the markers were pretty watered down, while the other half, they were pretty opaque. Didn't have a problem with them. And even after shaking up some of these pens to try to mix up the paint a little bit, I still had issues with some of these markers and the paint still being watery. Now, one other thing I did notice about these markers is that the tips don't stay saturated with paint for long. I mean, some of them don't. I mean, I can leave my Posca markers alone for days to weeks and just pick one up without shaking it, and I still get a smooth flow of paint. The paint tips are still saturated with paint. Now, if you were to ask me which markers do I like better, the Carmel markers or the Posca markers, I'm gonna have to say the Posca markers. For one thing, they have a larger variety of colors, and I can also get them at my local art store or even order online. I'm sure you can do the same with Carmel markers as well. And I've never had any issues with the Posca markers regarding the paint being too thin to cover up another color. So I'm just gonna have to stick with the Poscas, but I do appreciate Carmel Industries for sending me over some of the markers to review and to test out. Most definitely I will still be using these markers for anything else I got going on in the future. I mean, they're not cheap markers. I just think that the paint needs to be thickened up just a little bit. But like I said, they're really heavy duty, durable, sturdy, tough markers. Well guys, so that's gonna do it for the review. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and enjoy the reveal for this Carmel marker art piece.